My sister hadn't called our mother in nearly a decade. But the moment she heard the word cancer, she showed up with fake tears, a floral apology, and a legal folder dressed as concern. While I was feeding Mom soup and praying through fevered nights, she was rehearsing betrayal in silk pastels. And I might have stayed silent, might have let her rewrite the ending, if I hadn't seen the forged signature tucked beneath a couch cushion. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd changed, and started preparing to show the world exactly who she still was. My sister hadn't spoken to our mother in 8 years. Not a birthday call, not a holiday card, nothing but silence and shadows between them. But the very day Mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she appeared on our doorstep, dressed in soft pastels, mascara perfectly smudged for sympathy, clutching a bouquet of overpriced lilies in one hand and a leather folder in the other. I stood there in the hallway, watching her hug our mother like she hadn't once called her a manipulative burden during their last screaming match. Watching her wipe away tears that I knew too well came from a place colder than grief. And for a moment, God help me, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe time had changed her, that regret had softened her sharp edges. That family still meant something to her. But people like her don't change. They just wait. The folder wasn't just a folder. Inside were documents, carefully crafted legal paperwork, medical directives, power of attorney, and a newly drafted version of the will. All ready for signature, all in favor of her. She told me it was just to help Mom prepare, that it was what Mom wanted, and that I shouldn't make this harder than it needs to be. She spoke with that silky voice she always used when lying, the kind that wrapped around your ribs like velvet rope. I didn't catch it at first. I was too busy feeding Mom soup, organizing medication schedules, watching the color fade from her cheeks day by day. But late one night, I found one of the unsigned documents tucked beneath a cushion on the couch, and everything clicked. She hadn't come home for redemption. She came for the will, and she almost got it. Almost. Because I saw the fine print. I saw her handwriting, fake gentle loops trying to mimic Mom's declining scrawl. I saw the manipulation, the twisted performance she had prepared, down to every staged tear and every timed, "I forgive you, Mama." And I knew right then, this wasn't neglect, this wasn't indifference, this was theft, and it was personal. So no, I wasn't confused. I wasn't grieving too hard to notice, and I damn sure wasn't finished. While I was wiping down countertops, measuring out morphine doses, and holding a cold rag to my mother's forehead during her fevered nights, my sister was in the other room rewriting history. She told the lawyers that I was difficult, combative, that I didn't respect our mother's final wishes. She smiled softly as she said it, as if concerned for everyone's well-being, even mine. And the worst part? They believed her, all of them, because she wore pearls and I wore grief. The first time I heard the term emotionally unstable, it came from a man in a suit who didn't know my middle name. He leaned across the table, gently, like he was delivering a diagnosis, said he just wanted to make sure everything was in order, and recommended Mom undergo a psychological assessment, just to verify she was of sound mind when making financial decisions. But I knew what it meant. It meant my sister had already planted the seeds. It meant they were preparing to call me crazy. Behind my back, she had drafted new power of attorney documents. She forged Mom's weakening signature with a finesse that terrified me, leveraging every moment I left the room to make a phone call or get some sleep. Somehow, quietly, methodically, she gained access to the bank accounts. When I went to check balances, just to pay the hospice nurse, I was locked out, passwords changed, calls ignored, even the mail started going elsewhere. When I asked her, she acted confused, almost offended. "It's just a precaution," she said. "Mom's not in any state to be worrying about bills." And when I pushed back, just once, I was told flatly that any further interference would result in a restraining order against me, the daughter who'd been there every single day. So I stopped asking. I sat at the edge of Mom's bed, holding her hand while the world I thought I understood began to feel like quicksand. The more I fought, the faster I sank. I wanted to scream, to drag every piece of evidence into the light, but the room was already dark, and every door was quietly, efficiently closed. They shut me out of my own mother's life, and no one believed me. You think being betrayed by family is bad? Imagine being erased while standing right there. But don't look away just yet. The twist that woke me up is coming, and you won't want to miss it. It started with a single sentence, one that cracked through the fog of helplessness like lightning through storm clouds. A friend, an old colleague from my days in investigative journalism, called me after hearing what had happened. She didn't offer pity. She didn't offer condolences. She just said, "She's not who she says she is. You know that, right?" And I did. Deep down, I always had. But hearing it out loud was like pressing on a bruise and realizing the bone beneath was broken. So, I got to work. I dusted off instincts I hadn't used in years. I typed her name, her current name, into every database I could access. But I didn't stop there. I searched the name she used when she married in her 20s, the one she used when she moved out west, the name she had buried after her first fraud case, sealed behind non-disclosure settlements and quietly paid victims. The deeper I dug, the more rot I uncovered. It wasn't just our mother. She had a pattern: lonely widowers, elderly women with no surviving children, retired couples with new inheritances, all drawn in by her charm, her faux philanthropy, her crocodile tears. She promised safe investments for noble causes, supporting education, feeding children, housing veterans. And every time, she walked away with the savings. They walked away with nothing. I hired a private investigator, a quiet one, the kind that preferred paper trails to confrontation. We combed through emails, subpoenas, scanned checks, photos from charity events that didn't exist. Each file, each bank record, each notarized lie was a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, formed a portrait so damning, so irrefutable, it could flatten her entire empire in a single breath. And still, I told myself this wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about getting even or reclaiming pride. It was about the truth, about restoring the voice of a woman, our mother, who had no strength left to defend herself. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the whole room to hear it. So, what would you do if you discovered your sibling wasn't just selfish, but a serial con artist with a trail of victims behind her? Yeah, I had to act fast. And this is where things start turning. The first strike came quietly. No press, no confrontation, just a certified petition, filed under urgency with the civil court, requesting an injunction to halt the transfer of my mother's house. I submitted documented proof of psychological manipulation. Emails written in a voice that wasn't hers. Legal documents timed too conveniently with her chemotherapy sessions. The judge didn't need convincing. The transfer was frozen within 48 hours. Next, I flew to Florida. She thought her past had been buried beneath the palms and sand. But I found one of her ghosts, a sweet woman named Alma, who once trusted my sister with her entire retirement. She had no children left, only faded photo albums and a prepaid cremation plan. But her voice, frail as it was, still carried weight. With trembling hands, Alma gave her statement, signed every page. Her words were clear. She promised to protect me, and she left me with nothing. Back home, my attorney drafted a civil lawsuit: wire fraud, elder abuse, identity misrepresentation. He handed me the thick stack of papers and said, "We can move forward immediately." But I didn't even glance at them. "Not yet," I said. "I don't want her behind bars, at least not now. I want her exposed." He looked confused. "I don't want to destroy her in court," I added, folding the paper slowly. "I want to destroy her legend, right in front of the people she's trying so hard to impress." It wasn't about legal victories anymore. This was about dignity, about reclaiming a narrative that had been twisted too long by polished lies and designer smiles. I didn't need a courtroom to prove who she was. I needed a spotlight, a stage, an audience, and she had already sent out the invitations herself. She had no idea The gala she was planning would become her own reckoning. She thought she was hosting a celebration. I was about to turn it into her unmasking. At this point, maybe you're thinking, finally, justice is coming. But hold on, because what I did next wasn't in a courtroom. It was on her own stage, with everyone she ever wanted to impress watching. The night of the gala was a spectacle. Velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers, guests in floor-length gowns, men in tuxedos swirling glasses of champagne. The banner above the entrance read "Women for Hope" in gold-embossed script. And there she was, my sister, basking in admiration like a queen at her coronation. Cameras flashed. City officials shook her hand. Philanthropists and socialites clung to her every word. Her performance was flawless, right down to the faux humility and over-rehearsed laugh. I was there too. Press badge clipped to my blazer. A small team by my side, 3 trusted colleagues from my newsroom days, posing as assistants, videographers, interns. We moved quietly. A laptop here, a connection cable there. While the string quartet played softly in the corner and the final course was served, we loaded the video file into the central media system, set to autoplay at a specific timestamp during her speech. When she stepped on stage, the room fell silent. Her voice rang out, smooth and melodic, full of empty platitudes about kindness and transparency. "Tonight," she said, "we stand for those who have no voice." And then the screen behind her flickered. At first, just a blur, then a slow fade in. Her real name, her oldest alias, followed by a mugshot from 2003. Next, the voice of Alma from Florida, frail but clear. She took my home. Then the documents, forged bank records, doctored emails, altered contracts, each stamped and highlighted for clarity. Her carefully curated life unraveled in real time. She froze. The microphone slipped slightly in her hand. "That's not true!" she shouted, voice shrill, face paling under the stage lights. "This is fake! This is... But the room had already turned on her. People stepped back. A man at the front table shook his head and stood up, disgusted. A donor pulled out his phone and started recording. Even the mayor's aide was whispering into her earpiece, frowning. And my sister, who had spent years mastering control, couldn't find her footing. Her eyes darted around the ballroom like a trapped animal. Her jaw clenched. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth again, but no words came. 2 officers stepped into the back of the room. I made no move toward them. Just sipped my water and said quietly to no one in particular, "Let her stew in the shame first." And she did. She stood there, shaking in the spotlight, while her empire cracked at the seams. And for once, she couldn't talk her way out. She went silent. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice with quiet precision, wait until you see how I walked away without saying a word, and still made the whole room remember. She stood frozen in the spotlight, still clutching her microphone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes, wild and glassy, scanned the crowd in vain for a friendly face, but all she found were turned shoulders and sideways glances. Her voice had gone hoarse from denying the undeniable, and her once adoring audience had already started to melt away, murmuring in tight circles, jaws clenched in disgust. But I didn't gloat. I didn't approach the stage or say a single word to her. I let the silence say everything. The final frame of the exposé faded to black. The lights returned to full brightness. And with the entire ballroom holding its breath, I turned, walked calmly toward the donation table, and placed a single black USB into the velvet-lined box that bore her charity's crest. It was labeled with gold foil, "The truth you forgot to include." A quiet offering, a final word. I didn't look back, not even when I heard her voice crack behind me or the press scrambling to photograph the scene. I walked past the stunned guests, past the stunned waiters still holding trays of untouched champagne, and stepped into the crisp night air like a woman stepping out of someone else's shadow. The next morning's headline was everything I expected. Socialite turned swindler unmasked at her own gala, splashed across front pages and news sites from coast to coast. A photo of her mid-shout, eyes wide, mouth twisted in disbelief, was paired beside a still from the exposé video. Her forged signatures, her victims' faces, her empire of lies collapsing in real time. When my videographer caught up with me in the parking lot that night, still buzzing from the footage we captured, he asked me what it felt like. I didn't hesitate. I said, "She built a castle of mirrors. All I did was turn on the lights." And I meant it, because justice isn't always a courtroom or a gavel. Sometimes it's as quiet as a flash drive, and as devastating as the truth finally being seen. You might think it ends here, with shame, exposure, and applause. But no, the most powerful part of this story isn't the downfall. It's what came after. My mom passed away exactly 31 days after the gala. There were no machines beeping in the background, no sterile hospital scent, just the scent of lavender, sunlight through cotton curtains, and her hand in mine. She looked so small in that bed, but when she opened her eyes and whispered, "You saved me, baby," I knew she'd never been stronger. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about being seen, being protected, being loved until the very end. And she was. I made sure of that. After the funeral, I didn't rush into anything. For once, there was no court document to file, no meeting to attend, no plan to execute, just quiet, heavy, aching quiet. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you wonder if you've forgotten how to breathe without a fight. I stayed in the house. Her house. My house now, technically. But I still called it hers. I slept in her old quilt, walked barefoot in her garden, and started trimming back the lavender she loved so much. It had overgrown while everything else fell apart. I figured it deserved a second chance too. I didn't want to build a legacy of bitterness, even if the world would have understood. I wanted something healing, something alive. So I created the Edith Foundation, named after my mother. Not the version people saw at society functions, but the real her. The woman who saved every grocery receipt in a tin box, who remembered birthdays better than calendars, who hummed while boiling tea. The foundation helps elderly women who've been isolated, manipulated, or simply forgotten. Women like her, women who deserve more. Every morning, I write letters by hand to women I'll never meet. I sign them simply, "Someone who sees you." Sometimes I tuck a pressed flower inside. Sometimes it's just a note, "You're not alone." It started small. Now I send out hundreds. A few get returned, but many don't. And that's enough. That's more than enough. I planted white chrysanthemums and lavender along the fence line. At sunrise, they glow like they're lit from within. I drink my tea slowly now, none of that gulping between Zoom calls or legal consultations. I sip, I breathe, I look. There's a kind of holiness in being present again, in letting life be simple. One afternoon, the lawyer who helped me with the civil petition stopped by to drop off some final paperwork. We sat on the porch, watching bees flirt with the lavender. He asked if I missed the courtroom, the tension, the thrill of the win. I smiled and said, "Justice isn't a moment, it's a garden. You plant it, water it, wait. And one morning, you realize you've been standing in it all along." My sister never reached out after the exposé. The last I heard, her accounts were frozen, her charity license revoked, and she was somewhere overseas trying to reinvent herself under another name. I didn't follow up. She chose mirrors. I chose roots. Every week now, a neighbor girl comes by to help me with the garden. Her name's Ava, 12 years old, curious, kind. I teach her how to compost, how to cut basil without bruising the leaves, how to listen to the earth instead of trying to conquer it. She reminds me that not all inheritances are monetary. Some are passed down in gestures, in silence, in the way we show up for one another. On the anniversary of my mother's passing, I lit a candle beside the window and played her favorite song on the old record player. The one with the tiny skip in the second verse that always made her laugh. I sat there for a long time, just watching the flame flicker in the glass. And I felt her, not as a memory, but as a presence. Strong, steady, free. So yes, my sister tried to steal everything. But in doing so, she gave me something she never intended. Clarity. Purpose. and peace. The kind that settles deep and stays, like lavender roots in well-loved soil. And every time I send out another letter to another forgotten woman, I whisper the same thing into the envelope before sealing it. You are seen, you are held, you are not alone. Now here's the part no one expects. The villain didn't just fall, she unraveled. And if you've ever wondered what shame looks like when no one's watching, this next moment will stay with you. Of all the endings I had imagined for her, this was the one I never voiced. Not out of mercy, but because it felt too quiet to count as justice. After the gala, her world crumbled fast and without ceremony. The donors pulled out within 24 hours. Her board of trustees released a bland, two-sentence statement distancing themselves from her unverified actions. The charity's website was taken offline by the end of the week, and the foundation itself was officially shut down not long after. Her name, once printed on glossy event flyers and whispered at champagne brunches, vanished from every guest list and inbox. And then came the silence. Not the dignified kind, but the kind that buzzes with abandonment. Her social media froze in time, the last post still a smiling photo from the gala, captioned with a hollow quote about gratitude. No comments, no apologies. Just the soundless retreat of an empire built on borrowed names and broken truths. Bank accounts were frozen pending investigations, assets were seized, and friends, the kind who once toasted to her grit and vision, evaporated into polite distance, some pretending they had never really known her. It wasn't a dramatic fall from grace. It was slower, lonelier, a crumbling from the inside out. Rumors floated that she tried to reinvent herself again, under a new alias, somewhere out west. But the world has grown wary of pretty speeches and curated smiles. No one gave her a second stage, or a second chance. And then, one rainy afternoon, weeks after I had stopped thinking of her altogether, I saw her. It was a corner cafe, nothing special, just a little place I liked for its worn leather seats and the scent of cinnamon that clung to the walls. I was there to pick up a tea, lavender chamomile, the kind my mother used to love. I stepped in, brushing rain from my coat, and there she was, hunched at the corner table, alone. A chipped ceramic cup sat untouched in front of her, steam long faded. Her hair, once sculpted into camera-ready waves, hung limp around a face I barely recognized, pale, hollow-eyed, smaller somehow, as if shame had physically eroded her. She didn't notice me at first, but then she did. She looked up. Our eyes locked. Not for long, maybe 2 seconds. But it was enough for her shoulders to stiffen, for her lips to twitch like they might form words she couldn't find. And then slowly, she looked down. Not in defiance, not in sadness, but in surrender. As if the very act of seeing me had collapsed whatever facade she had left. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Her silence said everything. The room around us stayed the same. Coffee machines hissed, spoons clinked against saucers, conversations rose and fell. But at that table, there was only stillness. And shame. Not the performative kind that begs for forgiveness. This was deeper. The kind that festers when there's no one left to lie to. Not even yourself. I took my tea and left. As I passed her table, I saw her flinch. Just a little. Like a ghost remembering it once had a heartbeat. She didn't look up again. I walked home in the rain, no umbrella, coat soaked through, but I felt lighter than I had in months. Some victories don't come with applause or headlines. They come with the quiet knowing that you've become the mirror they can't escape. That your very presence now reflects what they tried so hard to outrun. Her fall wasn't cinematic. It didn't end with sirens or arrests or confessions. It ended in a cafe with a cooling cup of coffee and a bowed head. And honestly, that was more than enough, because in that moment, I realized something powerful. I had never needed her to suffer to feel free. I only needed her to see the truth and to sit in it, and she was. Every day, in every quiet room, in every muted conversation, she was living in the echo of her own choices. She wasn't destroyed by me. She was undone by herself. What do you believe legacy really means? Is it about money or the way you choose to live after the storm? My answer? Let me show you in one last memory. They asked me to speak at the Ethics and Elder Care Conference. The invitation came wrapped in lavender stationery, tucked between letters from women who'd read my story in the local paper. Some wrote to thank me. Some wrote because they had no one else to tell. But all of them ended their letters the same way. I thought I was the only one. So when I stepped onto that modest stage, no lights, no dramatic music, just a warm room and a waiting silence, I wasn't there to tell a tale of revenge. I was there to offer recognition, a mirror, a truth. I wore the same navy blazer I had worn at the gala, not as a statement, just as a reminder that dignity, once reclaimed, doesn't need sequins to shine. I stood in front of a modest audience, care workers, policymakers, daughters like me, and simply told the story. Not with flair, not with flourish, just the facts. A woman, a mother, a life quietly slipping away, and another woman, her own blood, who tried to harvest the last bits of that life for personal gain. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't even say her name. I just painted the picture as it happened, then stepped back to let them fill in their own conclusions. When I finished, I said only one sentence more, the one that had echoed in me long before I ever found the courage to say it aloud. My sister tried to steal a legacy. Instead, she gave me one I'll never forget. It wasn't applause I received, but silence, the good kind, the kind where people aren't clapping because they're still holding their breath. In the weeks that followed, the Edith Foundation grew. What began as a single office and a battered desk became a lifeline for women in 24 states. Retired nurses volunteered to do welfare checks. Former paralegals offered to help draft wills for elderly women who had no family left to trust. And every week, I still write letters by hand, real ink on real paper. You're not forgotten. You still matter. They don't get to define your worth. It's not about saving everyone. It's about letting someone feel seen just once before it's too late. I keep my days simple. I wake early, take tea in the garden, and watch the way sunlight touches each blossom like a blessing. I planted lavender and white daisies because they were my mother's favorites. And when the wind stirs them just right, I imagine her smile, soft and unburdened, like that final moment when she squeezed my hand and whispered, "You saved me, baby." Some days I miss her so much it knocks the air from my lungs. But grief has softened now. It no longer cuts. It simply reminds. I often think about legacy, not the kind built on wealth or recognition, but the quieter kind. How we show up for those we love, how we protect what's right, even when no one's watching. And sometimes, how we stand still when others expect us to crumble. That's the legacy I carry. That's what she left me. Forgiveness, I've learned, doesn't require reunion. It doesn't even require words. It simply asks you to stop carrying someone else's shame as your own. An inheritance? That's not always measured in money. Sometimes it's the weight you refuse to pass down. Sometimes it's the garden you choose to tend instead. I still see her face in the paper from time to time. Mugshots, hearings, brief stints of reinvention. Each time she looks smaller, not thinner, just diminished. But I don't clip the articles anymore. I don't dwell. Her story stopped being mine the day I stopped chasing her shadow. The truth is, I don't hate her. I just don't belong to her narrative anymore. Now, I write my own. Every day, with every flower I plant, every letter I send, every elder I help protect, I write it again. And if I've learned anything from all this, it's this. Forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance, and love doesn't mean blindness. You can honor where you came from without letting it define where you're going. These days, I find power not in what I've done, but in what I choose not to do. I don't need to correct the record anymore. I don't need to defend myself. I just live, fully, quietly, unapologetically. And that, in itself, is the loudest truth of all. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this story moved something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that matter.